Hi, it's Lili. Today I'm going to share with you plenty of tips and tricks on how to design your own miniature set for stop motion animation. So even if you're a complete beginner or someone with more experience, I hope there's something in this video for you. It's very easy to get inspired by what is out there, what is so beautiful and professional when it comes to stop motion animation. Especially if you start at it, my first tip will be simplify. Because it's like, oh, I want to do 3 sets, I want 4 puppets, I want to tell this story. Like, make it as simple as possible. How many sets do you really need? How many puppets do you really need to tell the story that you want to tell? My second point will be about research and getting reference images, because it's very easy to get excited, you want to get building and get material. Maybe take the time first to get online, gather as many pictures as possible, go through it again and again to see the detail of it. What is exactly that you like about a certain miniature set, about a style, about an aesthetic, so that you can slowly develop the idea in your head. For me, between the moment that I have an idea and the moment that I start building the set, it can take a few days, few weeks, months. There's some time that is needed to be able to elaborate a bit more from the initial rough idea to something that will be much more substantial. So gather images, go through them again and again until you have something really nice to work with. There's a book I always go back to, is The Element of Style. That's basically the Bible of architecture. So whatever era you're looking for, you're gonna have all the reference image for the door, for the windows, for the fireplace, for all the architectural trim. It's so useful to have this as a base to get inspiration. So if you are able to afford this book, The Elements of Style, I highly recommend it. Now the third point will be about scale. When I started into stop motion animation, I realized, well, if you want to buy furniture or buy props for your set, you're gonna be limited by 2 scale. The dollhouse scale, 1/12, or the Barbie scale, 1/6. When it comes to stop motion animation, quite often you go to the bigger scale, 1/6, because you have more room to move your puppets around, to animate them. You have more room to maneuver in it. But a 1/6 set takes lots of space. So I thought, well, instead of relying on things that I'm gonna buy, what if I create my own scale? If I create everything from scratch, might as well come up with my own scale. So instead of being limited by 1/12 or 1/6, I decided what's going to be much more easier to manage is 1/10. So let's say I've got a table that is 70 centimeters from the ground to the level of the table. That is 7 centimeters. 77 centimeters. If I have a ceiling that is 3 meters high, that is 30 centimeters. So it just made my life much more easier. When it comes to calculate things, there's no complicated thing that I need to take into consideration. I just divide everything by 10. Now, that means not only I'm gonna design everything from the set, from the furniture, from the props myself, but I also mean I'm gonna design my own puppets. Because if you rely on armature for puppet, for stop motion animation, beautiful, brilliant armature, but they're quite bigger, so they will apply better on a scale that is 1/6, for example. It's worth taking the time to research exactly what you're going to use for the animation. If you want to use an armature that is bigger, that means everything else will be bigger. So scale is something that is probably one of the most important things to decide, because everything needs to be on the same scale. And if you want to create more than one animation, let's say you want to use some furniture, some props for the same one, might as well choose the right scale from the start. A good way to test this out is to create a rough mock-up in cardboard or paper, just a bit of tape or hot glue gun, and to create a scale model of what you have in mind. Let's say you want to design a kitchen. Create a kitchen very roughly in cardboard on a scale that is 1/10 or 1/12, and the other one in 1/6. And create very rough furniture. I'm really talking about basic shape in cardboard and all that, just to get a sense of the scale. Because it's one thing to look at doll houses and to look at Barbie houses and to look at the scale, or maybe what they look like in paper. But once you get into 3D, you get a real idea quickly of what it means in terms of space. Because once you decide which scale you go for, you're gonna have to build it. And once you have the volume in front of you, you get a better feel of how much space it's going to take to build. Also how much it's going to cost, because obviously the bigger you got, the more expensive it gets. Once you get a rough mock-up in cardboard, you can start taking measurements. You have a big board for the floor, and you have each walls, and you have the ceiling. It adds up very quickly. You might be lucky to have a few boards in your garage or something to work with. But once you get into big scale, you're going to need to go to the DIY store, and the costs add really, really quickly, because yes, you need more timber, a larger panel, but everything into your miniature set is going to get bigger, so you need more material as well. So overall, I think spending time beforehand, working on the mock-up, getting a really good idea of what you need will also help you define what you're going to have to spend to build it at a certain scale. Another thing I like to work with when it comes to scale is, am I going to be able to move the set from one room to another? Now that sounds a bit silly, but actually I've built all my set to be able to pass them through the door frame. Door frame might not be the first thing you have in mind when it comes to designing a set, but in one way or another, you're going to have to move your set from one room to the next. Let's say you need to bring it outside to spray some varnish or something. Once it's all done, you need to maybe moving it to the next room for a photo shoot. You need to be able to pass the door frame. So quite often, I've limited my size to a 60 centimeters by 60 centimeters. That means that once you have the base of, let's say the piece of timber on the base, you add the wall, so you depend on the thickness of it, you add a bit more, and then you need to have your hands all around it to hold it. And by the time you add all of that, you end up with like 70 centimeters roughly. So have a look at your door frame, because if you measure them and then they are smaller or larger, you know that you have a bit of room to maneuver. It might sound strange to start your design by looking at the size of the door frame, but that makes a huge difference, because if you design something beautiful but you're not able to pass it through the door, you're going to have some issue later on. Same thing if you need to move and use it with your car. Measure the booth of your car, because especially when it comes to height, you need to make sure that it passes through. So the logistic of it is quite important, and if you have it in mind from the start, that allows you to create something that is much easier to maneuver, much easier to store as well, because storage is an issue. It's one thing to build it, and then you're left with this big thing. What are you going to do next? So storage, if you limit the scale and the size of it, it's going to be a bit easier. That doesn't mean that you need to restrict yourself when it comes to size. If you want to create something bigger, just think about dividing it into sections. If you look at this set, the size of it in total is 90 centimeter by 60 centimeter. So I built 2/3 on one side and 1/3 on the other side. Now, as you can see, the lines show up in the rough edit, but that can be quickly corrected with Photoshop, so you just remove it in the edit. Now, my next point is going to be about the importance of creating a good mock-up. I'm not talking about something really fine and detailed. I'm just talking about something even rough that force you to make decision. It's not just, oh, I want a door here. Where do you want the door? How big do you want the window? How tall do you want the window? All of those elements are really important to decide early on, and having a rough mock-up in cardboard is the quickest way to have to face the decision and realize in 3D how your set is going to work. So I think investing the time in a mock-up, quite often when I did one, I built it roughly. I mean, cardboard, tape, glue gun, perfect. You don't need anything elaborate. I would say do the furniture as well on the same scale. Ideally put a puppet in there. And then I do it one day, leave it on the side. The next day I come with a fresh pair of eyes. I look at it like it looks a bit tight. It should be wider. This should be different. The layout doesn't work. So give yourself time to play with the mock-up, and then to slowly see, yeah, no, I'm not going to have enough space with my hand to animate. So give yourself the opportunities to develop the set until it's really the right design, and it's going to be easier to animate, and it's going to look really good on camera. So that takes time to make those decisions. Quite often I've done a mock-up in cardboard, and then I went back on paper and start to get into much more details. It's not just say, yeah, roughly it's going to be this size, it's going to be this height. Like, make the decision on paper, because that means once you have those technical drawings done, I'm not talking about professional technical drawing, but once you have it done, everything else is going to be smoother because the decision have been made about the design, not just roughly, but you have to make a line here or there. So the process of decision making in that is crucial, because then it's going to be much straightforward. Cutting your board, you know exactly what goes where. Now, one of the biggest elements that I take into consideration when I design my set is windows, because lighting is everything when it comes to films. So at the beginning of it, I was designing my room. Oh, I'm gonna have window over there, window there. Once I started to get more interested into lighting for films, you start to understand how incredibly important it is. By changing the proportion of the window, their position, and the light that you're going to pass through the window, you can completely transform a space. So now if you look at those sets, for example, you can see that this miniature set without the window in the middle will just not look as good. And here's some other example. We can see how crucial the windows are into creating the atmosphere for the room. The window is not only going to bring you really crucial light, but they're going to say a lot about the space and even the wealth and the economic situation of the person in it. So now if you look at this specific set, you can see that you have those higher windows that inform you straight away that you're on low ground or basement type of place. So you can get an idea of the financial situation of the person who have to live in those conditions. Not only that, but it gives you really interesting opportunities to work on the light and how it casts a shadow. So this window compared to another one give you a really strong sense of the room itself and of the story that you're going to tell. And it seems silly at first thinking about a window, but that's the first thing I have in mind, is how I'm going to light this room and how I'm going to use the lighting to tell the story in the way I want to tell it. Now, if you've seen lots of my tutorial, you can see that quite often I do interior design more than exterior. And that is a really important difference if you do indoor or outdoor sets. Because if I do something that is indoor, I can control what the camera sees, so that limits the amount of set I need to build. I know exactly where the camera stops. You can see through the windows. That's why quite often I add trees behind, so just to create some kind of texture instead of just having a blank window and the light going through. But I control what the camera sees in a limited amount of space. If I created outdoor scenery, it becomes huge because the camera can see everywhere. So I've done one that was the cottage, and I have to build up quite a large set. You need to have a backdrop, so it's getting bigger and bigger, and that is really important if you create something to know that if it's outdoor, it's going to get huge. And a great way to do it, once again, go back to making mock-up. Let's say you want a park with a house in the middle of it. Do it on the scale that you decide, just to get a sense of how big it is. I mean, trying to do a street, it's gonna get massive. I did a street way back, and I remember I was cheating all the way. I was trying to squeeze everything just to fit, because once you get into outdoor scenery, it's get enormous. You might be lucky enough to have a giant garage, basement, warehouse, whatever it is. But realistically, you need to build with what you have. And if you have a small desk, if you have a side of the kitchen table, you need to be realistic. If you start, maybe start indoor. Another big element I want to tackle is the mood, or is the emotion. Because you can create a kitchen, living room, whatever it is, that feels completely different with what you put in there and how you design it. Now, I love interior design because I feel that it's a strong part of storytelling. If you look at a good movie that got really quality production design, quite often when you have a scene starting, they start with a wide shot. Press pause on the remote, have a look at it. Every single item in there has been decided, has been chosen specifically. They don't randomly put a chair there and some props and stuff. Everything has been put there for a reason, and they tell a specific story with the way they have arranged it. And I think it's worth taking the time to analyze movies that you enjoy, just to realize the amount of work that goes into selecting, choosing, and composing the image. And it's the same that goes with your miniature set. It's not randomly saying, I'm going to put a bed, I'm going to put a chair, I'm going to do your props. Take the time to think about which mood you try to create, which emotion you try to share with the viewer, which is really, really crucial. Because if I show you a different example of, let's say, the living room, you look at this one, oh my God, you feel the sadness and just, you just don't want to be in that room. And that's exactly the kind of feeling that I was trying to create. Now, if you look at another living room area, it's more modern, it's stylish, it's organized, it gives you a completely different feel. So at the end of the day, you're trying to tell a story. Take the time to think about how do you want to tell the story and what emotion you want to create for the viewer. If it's about sadness, everything in your design, you need to take that into consideration. The color pattern. Is it messy? Is it super clean? Is it colorful? Is it extremely muted? Is it modern? Is it very old school dated? All those elements are crucial because you can analyze the way someone feels by what they have around them. Another good way of test this is have a look at your bedroom. That speaks volume. Just try to be neutral and look at your bedroom. Is it a mess? Is it not? Is it super organized or not? Is it colorful? I'm pretty sure if you have a cleaning lady, she knows much more about you than what you realize because of the way we live and what we choose to put around us. So that's part of the story as well. And it's a fantastic way to elaborate and develop an idea. So it's not just a kitchen, it's not just like an office. You can really create the way someone feels inside of the set, the main character, the main puppet, and then you will share this emotion with the viewer because you want to tell a story that can touch people. If it's like, yeah, he's going to the office now, it's completely different than if you create an office that is kind of dark, kind of oppressing, and you work with the lighting to create shadow on it. You create a feeling for that puppet, and people who are going to see the film that you're making are going to be able to feel it. So it's worth taking the time to develop all those elements so that the overall set is much more than just a set. So now let's say you're giving yourself time to develop, to think, to research, and you want to tackle the build. Brilliant. Take the time to make sure that everything is modular. So if you look at my tutorial, every single wall, ceiling is modular. And I think it's extremely precious because it increases the quality of your film massively. At the beginning of it, when I was doing a stop motion animation, I had no idea what I was doing and I was just building some rough sets. The rare time that I didn't do a wall that was movable, I was frustrated. And you start shooting your movie and like, oh, I wish I can get in there, I wish I can move that. And it's just so frustrating because you put some time and effort and money into create a set and you limit yourself a lot by not making every wall removable. And I think it's another way of looking at films these days. Even something as a simple scene is going to be shot from lots of different angles. And you want to give yourself the opportunities to look at it like, oh, I want to close up to there, then I want a wider there, oh, I want a shot from above, and then I want to close up from when he start to sit, and then maybe close up on his hand when he pick up a teacup or whatever. So something very simple, someone walking inside a room, sitting down and taking a teacup. It could be designed and elaborate in terms of the composition of the shot, and make it so much more interesting than just one or two shots from that scene. And once again, it's worth going back to your film that you really enjoy and take the time to analyze how many shots have they taken from how many different angles to create that scene and to make it enjoyable and see the quality in it. So keeping modular, that will increase the quality of your film and give you the opportunity to create something even more interesting. Another one will be to make sure that it's raised properly. Most of my set, as you can see them from my tutorial, are built on stud, the kind of regular stud you'll find in any DIY store, and quite often they come and they are 9 centimeter high, And that is plenty enough for me to pass my hand underneath and be able to reach the wing nuts underneath the puppets, going in and out without a problem. I remember once I had the smallest stud and I go, yeah, I'm going to use it because it's leftover. And because it's lower down, by the time I come in and out with my hand, I touched, unfortunately, the set and it moved. And if you know stop motion animation, the last thing you want is movement with your set. So if you have some big chunky hand, measure them to make sure you have enough clearance. If you have tiny hand, you're probably going to be fine. But just in case, make sure you have enough space so you can come in and out without touching or interfering with the set itself. And at the end of the day, make sure that when you film and shoot your stop motion animation, you tape the set all along to avoid as much as possible any kind of movement. That's the last thing you want for stop motion animation. Now let's say you tackle the whole process of building. One element that you're going to need is patience, because everything will take more time than what you think. It's going to be more complicated. You will come up with problems to solve that you even thought or planned. It's going to be harder. So be patient and be kind with yourself. If you start to go nuts, it's normal. If you wonder how and why on earth you came with the idea of doing stop motion animation, that's normal. If you even think, you know what, that's it, I'm gonna set the set on fire, I'm gonna throw it into the bin, I'm not gonna say it's normal, but you know what, I went through this, so I won't judge you on that. Just be patient. If you had enough, go and have a cup of tea, do something else and come back the next day, because it could be just draining and tiring, and some days are rewarding and you look at, oh, today I've done this little chair, today I've done that, and sometimes you just go on and on for hours and days with repetitive tasks, and sometimes you do something wrong, you don't mix something properly and you have to start the whole thing the next day. So it could be very frustrating, very tiring. Just be patient, keep at it, you will get there. But it's usually harder than people thought initially. So don't be too hard on yourself if you don't reach your end goal as quickly as you thought. It's going to be harder. That's just what it is. That's stop motion animation. I used to say this a lot. Stop motion is not a hobby, it's a journey. And sometimes it's a long and tiring journey. But at the end of the day, you've got something that you can look back and be proud of. And I think that's really important. There's so much work that goes into it, and sometimes you can look at, oh, I didn't do this correctly, the animation is a bit rough, this should be no, just look at what you achieve. Just be proud of the result you have created on your own. And honestly, it's so easy to get triggered by little things. Honestly, I look back at my old animation and sometimes like, oh gosh, it looks rough, the animation is all over the place. But I keep those animations on my YouTube channel because I want to be realistic with it. When you start something, it doesn't look that great. The first thing is probably going to look crap because that's normal. You're a beginner at something. And then you get a bit better, and then a bit better, and a bit better. So there's no point putting all your ideas, the kind of storyline you wanted to create for years in the first animation, because it's going to be rough and it's not going to be as good as you thought. So you might put yourself up for disappointment if you put so much attention on the first one. The first one is just a way to learn, and do as much research as you can, take your time, watch every single video on YouTube that you can, which is great, but there's nothing like actually getting there, make a little set, make some props and puppet, and start animating, and just seeing the whole process of making a very short animation. Honestly, the first few weeks that I started to get really completely into this, I've developed such a stronger sense of respect for the people that are crazy enough to do this thing, because I realized just the magnitude of work involved. And that's why at the end of the day, when you finish your little short animation, other people are like, oh, that's cool, okay, that's fun. But be proud of what you achieved, because you know how hard it was to get there. So just appreciate the achievement, even the small one. And if all you've done the week is just create this little chair or create the head of the puppet or the clothes, just be happy and proud with that, because it's an achievement. It's something that other people are not able to do. So be proud with yourself. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a bit different from what I've done before. I hope there is something that you've learned or that you can take on your own project and it can make things easier for you. I'm thinking there might be some questions that people still have, and for the first time I'm going to do a Q&A. So if you have some question for me, I always disable the comments underneath my video. This is something I've done from the early stage to protect my mental health, and I'm so glad I did that because I'm pretty sure I sleep better as a result, not having to deal with all sorts of comments. But I'm more than open and happy to answer your questions. So if you have some question and answer regarding your own project or thing that you wish I can answer, send me an email. My email is swisslili@gmail.com. Ideally, don't send me 20 questions because I'm not going to be able to go through, but just one question. Send me a single line with your question, and then after a few weeks I'm going to do a Q&A video and answer some of your questions. So I'm not going to be able to answer all of them, and I apologize in advance if I'm not able to pick yours. But if it's worth it for you, send me an email, ask me a question, and I hope that I can help with your project. And maybe some questions are also wondered by other people, and I can answer to all of them through a different kind of video that I've done on this channel before. So that's it for today. I hope you take good care of yourself and that you're very kind and patient with yourself, because sometimes life is a bit rough, and stop motion animation is something that can bring you a little source of joy and happiness, and use your creativity to create something completely unique. So keep at it, don't lose hope. Even if you go a bit insane through the process, just keep at it. You'll be proud of the end result. Take care.